Good morning. You're getting poked by Laura. I am streaming this podcast on TikTok live right now. I will be posting that to YouTube later. So if you like to watch rather than listen, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube. You can find me under Nice Needles, Laura Drago also. And on Patreon, you can find me under Nice Needles. My podcast is called Getting Poked by Laura. It's free to join. I encourage you. I would love to have more members there. As I said, my modest goal is for 1 billion people as soon as possible. It's not a joke. It's an actual goal. So there we go. I thought I would talk about something a little more fun today, a little off the beaten path. I had somebody ask me about chakras in one of my lives, and I thought I would talk about that, but also talk about some other things that I've experienced. Certainly not everything I've experienced since making my big life change from sort of a standard American lifestyle, I would call it, into something a little more exploratory, creative, and off the beaten path. So just to give you a bit of background, if you haven't heard some of my other podcasts, I kind of give bits and pieces of who I am, because I think knowing who's talking and how you may relate or not relate to that person is important when understanding information and wisdom and advice and guidance and all that kind of thing. I grew up in the Midwest, in a very heavily Christian Reform area, very conservative area in Michigan. And I was there till I was 20, almost 21 years old, left and moved to New Mexico, where I pursued eventually a degree in American Studies, which is a cultural degree studying truly American culture all the way to its pre-colonial roots. Work in America, a highly political type of degree. Certainly wasn't my intention. My intention was to be educated about the place that I was born into and the system that I was a part of, and trying to understand it. And after having studied that and getting a degree in that, I went to work in corporate America. I worked for 2 very large insurance companies, not as an agent, but in the corporate aspect of insurance. Got a lot of business experience there, and also worked in internet startups prior to that, prior to 9/11 happening. It was during the boom in Silicon Valley and all of California. And after being broken by the corporate system, I got into some really good therapy and really meandered and found my way into Chinese medicine, which never in a million years did I anticipate doing or discovering, and how that has transformed my life from top to bottom. Gave me a lot of perspective. So in that transition, which for me really began as a solid, documented journey back in 2007, and we're now in 2025, so however long that's been, I came across a lot of different people and experiences, right? The people who come into Chinese medicine come from so many walks of life, very often other parts of medicine in the allopathic Western world. People who worked in or studied in martial arts. A lot of the men that I went to med school with came from martial arts, because they studied with masters who applied liniments and herbs, and they discovered treatments for things that didn't make sense to their Western understanding. And so that brought a curiosity, which brought them to herbalism, which brought them to med school. So I studied with a lot of people like that. I studied with a lot of massage therapists, people who practice all kinds of different energy healing, Reiki, Qigong, Tai Chi, and then medical professionals from other parts of the world who had their Western medical degrees, who ran hospitals, who ran cardiology wings of hospitals, who worked with cancer and stroke and developed protocols, and I mean just a wide variety of people. One of my favorite teachers studied philosophy at Harvard and Yale, I believe. And he grew up in the back of a Chinese restaurant. He was half American, half Chinese in terms of his heritage. White, I guess, is probably what he said. I'm not really sure, but he was an interesting guy. And he, on top of being brilliant and being one of my biggest inspirations for the way that I practice Chinese medicine, he helped me to understand some things that, to me, as a Midwestern skeptic girl, white girl, stepping into this medicine, so I was skeptical of absolutely everything. Absolutely everything. To me, it all seemed ridiculous, which was crazy, right? I'm like spending money to be at this school, but every time I would come across something, that the narrative that I have been fed and told my whole life is that, well, we know everything. So if that were true, if what you were telling me about herbs or oils, or if that were true, we as Americans would know. Like, give me a break, right? And boy, did I get my ego served to me on a platter with a fork and a knife. So he introduced me to some of these ideas of oils and like essential oils and minerals, rocks, crystals, stones, because a lot of people that I went to school with were really into that kind of stuff, and I was highly intellectual, right? The last time I've been in school, I was studying Supreme Court law. Like, I thought very highly of myself, right? My ability to critically think and take things apart, which is great. I love that part of my brain. I could have been an attorney. I would have been a great attorney. I would have hated my life the same way that I hated my corporate life, but I could have done it, right? I have that ability. And so this leap into the subjective, ethereal, metaphoric. Oh my goodness, my metronome is on. Okay, hold on. How did I see? I don't know how that happened. It didn't fit, right? It's square peg, round hole kind of thing. So this guy, very, very smart. He really, without knowing it, I'm sure, helped me to open up this skeptics part of my mind. And kind of confront pretty directly and simply some of these really Western ego-based brainwashing perspectives that were in my head, that, okay, I can know this stuff, but it doesn't make it the only truth, right? But I couldn't confront that directly. And so I was able to confront it with him because he was so intelligent, and it's so undeniable, and he's so gifted and wise. And so when we talked about oils, what he said to me was that the oils were a lot like what we talk about as Jing in the body. And Jing is a concept, it's an Eastern medical concept that we don't really have in Western medicine. I would say the closest thing to it might be like DNA. It's like sort of the good stuff, like it's like your most precious stuff. I always tell patients that your Jing is like your body's own personal oil. It's like this dense, condensed, pure essence of who you are. And when your Jing goes, if you live a full, long life and use up all your Jing, then you die. Jing is essentially what you run off of. And so he said that plants have the same thing, right? They have this essence, and that the oils are the plant's essence. And so if we understand the properties of herbalism, and let me explain what I mean by that. Herbalism is based on temperature, flavor, directionality, meridian, organ, season, and nature. So is it dry, is it damp, whatever. That's how herbs are categorized. And then they're put into bigger categories like herbs that resolve phlegm, or herbs that release the exterior. Like, we have so many ways to categorize. And so he's like, so if you understand that, the nature of these plants and what they do, when you can extract an essential oil, you're extracting the Jing from that plant. It's like all of that dense information. And then we talked about the energetics of, the meridian system and acupuncture points, and how the body works with plants internally. And so externally, how it blew my mind. I was like, wow, right, it's information, and it's dense, it's condensed. So it changed my relationship to oils. I kind of got away from the like, oh, it's woo-woo kind of stuff. I stopped using that word. And then with minerals, stones, crystals, what he explained was like, how old is that thing? How long did it take that thing to form? And what is it that's in there, right? Energy doesn't die, and you can measure the energy in different crystals and stones. Like you can electronically or sound. I'm sure there's a million ways to do it. It's not my area. But it's like a quartz watch, right? We call it quartz watch because there's quartz in it. It's a part of the energy that runs it. So there's energy and there's wisdom, and these things are very old, way older than me and you. And so just by being with these things, there is information there. There is an energy share there. There is an information share there. And it's so subtle, and it's so not a Western paradigm of thinking. It's like you have to have already experienced some of it, I think, which I had at that point, in order to understand what he was saying. And because I trusted him, because he's so flippin' smart, it just like it took down the skepticism enough that I could allow that in, that possibility. And then I began to work with these things with a little bit less rigidity and resistance and like, stones, oils. And is it what I rely on? Do I absolutely need those things to do my work? Absolutely not. I was not trained in those things. These are things I developed a relationship with over time. And so that type of stuff is what allowed me to open up to all of these other things I want to talk about, or at least a few of them, including chakras, which are a part of the Ayurvedic Indian philosophy. And there is a connection there between Chinese and Indian stuff. I don't proclaim to understand all of it, but I know enough to know there are connections there, in terms of the length of time that they've been around and the depth and the whatever. But chakras are something that I've played with a lot and understand, and all of these concepts can be integrated into the other ones. Like they're all really a part of the same thing. It's like one of the things about decisions or life paths, which way are you going to go? How are you going to go? Is that there's this idea spiritually in spiritual communities of, a million different paths, one destination. So like you're going to the same place, like you're going to get to where you're going to get to. It doesn't matter if you take a left turn or right turn, if you fall down or if you climb up, like eventually you're going to the same place for yourself. There's some free will in how you maybe make choices in that. Yeah, so some of the things that I want to offer as ways for you to play with new concepts, with lowering skepticism. I'm gonna tell you the list that I wrote down, and we can talk about more of them later if you want. I'm not gonna do them all in this episode because it's already been too long. But chakras are one. There's 7 of those. I'll go through them with you. Sound healing is another way that you can play with some of these concepts of energy and how they impact us in a non-conscious, non-ego way. And you can feel things in your body and experience life and movement and possibility in new ways. So when I say sound healing, I'm talking about sound bowls. If you've ever been in a sound bath, those are really cool. If you ever have the opportunity to go lay in a sound bath, do it. Tuning forks. More people tend to know about things like tuning forks. They're tuned to certain hertz that resonate with certain meridians or organs in the body, or even chakras. One of my favorite hertz to play, my son actually asked for it at night on our speaker, is 528 hertz, which is the frequency of the heart energy. If anybody's ever seen the movie Inception, I think all the rooms in the hotel are 528, which is so interesting to me, or like the room that they go into. Oils, we talked about oils. I want to tell a story about oils before this is over. We'll do chakras and oils for sure. Acupuncture, another way to play. Fascial work, if you've ever heard of working your fascia. And actually there is, in my mind, fascia, chakras, meridians, like I think they're all a part of a similar thing. I think they're all connected. So doing fascial work, you can do that on yourself. You can seek it, massage. A little bit different than fascial work. It's more of muscle work. Fascia is different than muscle. Meditation, an obvious way to play with awareness, with consciousness. Yoga, talked about that in a podcast a couple of days ago about spirituality and how yoga can help to create space in the body and open things up in ways that maybe you haven't felt since you were a baby. Yoga can be crazy like that. Nature, being in nature, true nature, like really getting away from sound and light, being in the woods, being with animals, being quiet, spending a day, many days camping, like just putting your feet on the ground at the park, That's another way to play with chi and energy. Using your creativity, creating art, music, writing, podcasting. And then my favorite one, sex. It's not everybody's favorite, but in my older years, because I really had not such a good time with like sexuality and all that stuff when I was younger, in my older years, it is like a prime focus. So let's go back to chakras. Chakras and oils. I want to tell a story quick about oils and how I learned to play with oils. Again, this is not what my degree was in. My degree was in Chinese medicine. It's a formalized practice of medicine. I learned diagnostics. I had to take Western pathophysiology, anatomy, physiology, chemistry, all those things. That was my degree, highly intellectual. But within that community, I was exposed to a lot of people who did different things. So oils was one thing, and I did this retreat once. It lasted for a year in total. We would go for a long weekend, and we went every season, spring, summer, fall, winter. And when we would go, the person who led the retreat would get out essential oils. We would get divided into different groups. I think there were 3 or 4 groups. Each group had, 10 people in it maybe. And we would get a scent, we would get an oil, and it was unlabeled. And we would sit in a circle. Everybody had a piece of paper and a pen, and we didn't talk to each other. And we would just pass the scent around. And everybody would smell it, and she gave us some instructions of maybe different things to do to connect to it, like put some on your finger and then touch a certain point on your body. She always said the top of the head, do 20 is what that point is. And just sit for a minute and just allow that oil to interact with you, see what comes up, write it down, whatever that is. Like it was just an expressive, free form activity. And we did this every season. And we did it with several oils. Each group would get different ones. And then afterwards, we would all come together in our respective groups, and everyone would listen to what each group said about the oil, and we would find out what the oil was beforehand. And what was so fascinating, and I've heard other people talk about doing exercises like this before, because we didn't talk, and we didn't know what the oil was. We would just pass it around. The things that people would talk about, some people would travel to other places in their mind. They would be like, this brought me to India. And some people would talk about flavors or smells or sensual experiences. And what was so fascinating is when you would go around this circle and listen to what everybody said, there was always a through line. There was always something, whether it was a color or a flavor or a place, that connected almost every single statement. So there was a truth without knowing what we had, and everyone, experiencing things differently. We all experience everything differently. We were able to extract a truth without even collaborating, other than through this plant itself. And doing that, probably at least a dozen times in community with people, it really shifted my idea of receiving information, of what wisdom is and what it looks like, our own ability to intuit and receive and respond. Like, to say that you should trust your gut, to say that you should follow it, to say that you should heal it so that you can hear it, that you should tune into it is such an understatement. We get so much. It helps me to understand how people were trackers back in the day, right? Like they could look at the ground, they could look at the poop of animals, they could listen to the wind and know how to get places, how to do things, what was coming. Like you can feel it. the more tuned in to that chi level, to that energy level, the more you can step out of your conscious mind that monkey mind we talked about the other day that wants to lead you everywhere. When you can slow down and just allow and move the skeptic aside, it's amazing what can come through. Learning to trust it is a different thing. That's why doing that exercise in community was so great, because you could see the truth reflected, and it was like, whoa, you can't deny it, when you see that. Chakras. Okay. And please don't say chakras. It's embarrassing. I think sometimes we just need to pronounce things the way they were intended to be said, from where they were originated. That's my feeling. But I take my cues from other people, and that's one that I've taken from others. So chakras, we have 7 of them. They are energy centers of the body, and they very much correlate. There's a lot of overlap in Western medicine and also in Eastern medicine, right? All these things are just sort of different ways of recognizing and seeing, kind of like what we were just talking about with oils. So at the top of your head, you have your crown chakra. This is where we think that, energy and information can be received. This is part of why that woman had me put the oils on the top of my head, one drop, and then you touch and you sit and you breathe. It's a receiving point from above. It's also a place that we can ask for things to come. When I do meditations with people frequently, I guide them to start at the top of their head, not always, and to imagine sort of an opening there and a receiving, and also an ability to let go. And I think that's generally white and purple. Sometimes I get the colors wrong. I think that's correct. And then you have your third eye, which is like the pineal area of the brain. And I think further back, the pituitary goes kind of straight back. So this is also a receiving area, but it's also about inner insight and wisdom. So I think it's white and then maybe blue, light blue in the middle. Check the colors. You've seen the diagrams. This is not my specialty. Other colors I know better. Then we have the throat chakra, which I think is purple. So this is right where our voice, so third eye, insight, intuitively into the brain, pituitary, pineal, the voice. A lot of times when people have like plum pit chi is what we call it, but like a knot in your throat, you can't get it out, or you have difficulty speaking when you're afraid or when you're under pressure, or you might get throat pain when you get upset, or you have difficulty swallowing pills, things like that. That can be a throat chakra issue. Then you have the heart chakra, which is green in the center of the chest. Then you have the solar plexus beneath that, which is like that xiphoid area, in the center of the rib cage, where your sternum comes down and meets the diaphragm right there. That's what we call the turning point, the pivot point in Chinese medicine. That would be the earth element. The color of that chakra is yellow. Then you move down a little bit further. I don't know if it's just above the belly button. That's like the sacral chakra. And that one is orange. That's like creativity, like literally like the creation of life, but also your general creativity. And then you have the first chakra, the root chakra, which is red or black, and that sits just below the belly button, kind of in between the kidney area. That's like, in Chinese medicine, we call that, I can't think of it right now, which is really embarrassing. It'll come to me. And so that's like the connection to earth. That's like that really base. That's like in Chinese medicine, that would be fear and kidneys. So you can pull the chart up and look at the colors, and you can just sit and think about these things. This is a meditation. You can just start pick a chakra that you think you might have issue with in any one of those areas of the body, and you can just sit and you can think about that color inhabiting that area. Think about it swirling, think about it moving, think about it turning, visualize it in your mind's eye, and just sit and do that. and try to stay with that feeling, try to stay with that area of the body, try to stay with that color, see what happens, see what comes up. Keep a piece of paper nearby. And what's really interesting about the chakras is that, as I said, there is such an overlap with something in Chinese medicine I would call the sanjiao. In Western terms, we tend to now say fascia, fascial tissue. It's a new term, like kind of that's out there, but it's not new within the circles that I work in. But it's this idea of this interconnected energy network that not only holds things together, but can really get off. It can get miswired and misfired. So when we take attention and we look at the body in these ways, whether it's true or not true, however you define that, there's value in the exercises. And I've seen people take a lot from these things because there's something ancient there that works, that resonates. So I would encourage you to play with things like chakras. And like I said, if you're not into that, then go get some fascial work, because fascia is connected to chakras. And it's connected to meridians and chi work and all that. It's just this intricate way that our body works that we don't really think of or talk about. We only think about it when it comes down to like a disease and we have a tumor, right? Or we have some like severe diagnosis of like the body is way out of whack. So these are ways we can play with this stuff before we get way out of whack, to try to get things back in whack. Back in whack. So yeah, I think that's all I got. I just wanted to talk about maybe some things you could play with, some different ideas about why you might want to play with them. Get out of the conscious ego-based mind, come into your energetic body, come into your somatic, your felt experience of your body. There's a lot of wisdom and truth there. But as I've talked about in some episodes that are coming up that will be released in the next couple of days and that I've talked about recently, coming out of that mind is really tough. It's a monkey, and it's a monkey that's out of control. It's an adolescent monkey. And in this world, we are rewarded for giving that monkey food and caffeine and cigarettes and letting it run us. Oh my God, 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 oh my God. Over here, over here. Oh, you know, we call it ADHD in this culture. But what it really is it's the mind. It's the monkey mind. And it's been given not only free rein, it's been given toxic fuel. And you're told that that's the way, multitask, you know, do it all, be it all. Okay, fine, good job. You've developed that skill. Can we put a leash on that monkey? Watch the monkey, let the monkey be the monkey, but understand you are not that monkey. And you do not need to be led by that monkey. You can allow that monkey to exist. You can acknowledge that maybe you don't have control over it, but you can separate yourself from that monkey, and you can experience things. Initially, when you play with things like chakras, sound healing, oils, acupuncture, fascial work, massage, meditation, yoga, going into nature, creativity, or sex, one of the things that I see in common with all of those things is that we let our minds take control and we don't allow ourselves to be and to enjoy and to exist and to experience. And anyone who's ever had a profound experience, say with nature, okay, one quick story before I go. I have a friend, Black man in America, grew up in New York, moved down to the South, went to college there, then moved out to LA eventually, had never been camping. And on my 30th birthday, I challenged myself to go on a really big hike. I was not in great shape. I'd been in corporate America for a while. I hadn't made the switch into medicine, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this hike. And so we went to this insane national park. It was one of the first national parks in the United States, called Big Basin. I believe part of it burned down a few years ago, which is really sad. It's the same area that they filmed Star Wars with the Ewoks on their little whatever air gliding jet things with the big trees. That's where we were. So we went camping there, and there was nothing. There was no cell service. Like, you had to have a satellite phone, you know, for anything. It was super quiet, way up high. Nobody was around, and we did this like all day hike for my birthday. Me and my friend from New York, and then my husband at the time, and another good friend of ours. 3 dudes. Of course, I had 3 dudes with me for my birthday. So he had this experience because he didn't come prepared. He didn't know, and he'd never been camping, and he ended up sleeping on the hammock outside every night. and there were raccoons who were coming and checking out the campground. And he had this like otherworldly out of body experience being in nature. It's like at first he was terrified, and then he felt his nervous system relax, and he was able to come into a new reality. And it changed his life. It changed his perspective from that point on. And I've known this person for 25 years. And that for them was a pivot moment. You know, why? It was so simple. It was moving out of that conscious mind. It was moving out of that ego-based mind of like, I have to understand everything and categorize everything, and it has to make sense. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, and I have to reject it, that skeptic. And so just being in nature that way allowed him to step through. So that's what I'm encouraging today, by way of some of these things. And like I said, I'm happy to open up about any of my experiences. I've had a lot. LA exposed me to a lot, way beyond this list, like wild stuff that has benefited me. And I want it to benefit you, especially, as I've said, in this great time of need that we are in. That is why I'm here. Please subscribe to my YouTube. It helps me. I'm a single mom. I'm trying to get views on there, hours on there, so I can earn there. Also on my Patreon, it's a non-commercial space. Your information is not sold. If you want privacy, that's the way to go. You can join for free, or you can donate. I'm great with having more listeners. 1 billion is my goal. You can also follow me on TikTok, on Blue Sky. Nice Needles. You can find me everywhere. Thanks for listening and for getting poked. Take care.